$15 million in dead cap space if they get rid of Wentz. It does free up $13 million, so they can make that decision if they want. But it's going to be
Would
hard
you make
to
that
move
decision
on as
knowing
quickly as you would think.
the cap space you just talked about, knowing, well,
Yeah, because
Philadelphia
I agree
made the
with
playoffs without Wentz
Right.
and has all the picks now.
I agree with Izzy. This was so much about Jonathan Taylor, and I don't think Wentz is the guy to pin your hopes on. You have a good team. You got to move on from Wentz to make
How the Raiders got in the playoffs, how the Steelers got in the playoffs, how the San Francisco 49ers got in the playoffs. Down 17-0 to the Rams, who needed the win for the 2 seed. A comeback, a shocker. Garoppolo huge down the stretch. That drive in regulation was 88 yards in 61 seconds. A walk-off pick on the Stafford Hawk. Sarah, did this tell you more about the Niners or Rams?
Oh, this was so perfect for this last day of great historic games because the Niners were 0-40 in games before this, 17 or more points down, and McVay, of course, 45-0 when leading at the half before this game. So we have all this historic things. So we learned about both of them. I think the biggest concern is about the Rams heading into the postseason because of your questions about Matt Stafford and that defense.
Like, he looked pretty solid yesterday. Are you encouraged if you're the Jaguars watching Trevor Lawrence yesterday?
Yes, and I hear people, everyone says this because it's like it's been normalized, but I try to make sure I prevent saying it. Meaningless game. Because what ends up happening is a guy like Trevor Lawrence goes out the final weekend, right? The #1 pick. Some people feel like, you know what, you already fired your coach. You already ain't going nowhere. Like, just sit the young fella down and get him ready for next year. But one play in particular is when the snap got away from him and he tapped it and he was about to get sacked. He rolled to the right, threw a dart in the end zone for a touchdown. That play right there makes it all worth it. That makes it all worth it. You now go home at the end of that game, and unlike the Colts, the Jaguars are like, we got our guy. In Indianapolis, it's like, we ain't sure. So that's why ain't no such thing, in particular in professional sports, as a meaningless game.
Well, Jalen, that game was certainly not meaningless because what it meant was I have to delete all the gambling apps on my phone because, man, it was tough yesterday.
They have the players, they have the ability to make life uncomfortable for the opposing quarterbacks, and they just don't seem to do it enough. And then this one, Jimmy G got more comfortable as the game goes on, not to mention the players that the 49ers were missing. It's very frustrating when you see a team like the Rams have all this talent and not play to it. It does speak to
Maybe San Francisco a little dangerous going into that matchup with Dallas. I'll give Sarah Spade the last word here.
Yeah, he mentioned, Clinton did, it was an away game for the Niners, but there was so much red in there that Stafford was having to go silent count at home, which is an embarrassment.
Coming up,
and something to think about as well.
Never trust a big Nick and a smile. It's rat poison.
No chicken or poultry byproduct meals. That's the promise we made to
Why choose proven quality sleep from Sleep Number? Because my Sleep Number 360 smart bed is temperature balancing, so I stay cool.
Messy stuff. You need complete, like laser measured.
Your taxes can be a risky game.
All over Earth, Vladimir Putin and Orban and Duterte and El-Sisi, every thug on Earth is rooting for Donald Trump to come back because they think it will be the end of political democracy on Earth. They think once America goes down, they will be able to drag it down everywhere. And President Biden has talked about that. So, yes, it's important that Donald Trump and other individuals face what
I really should be retired by now.
Fortify American democracy going forward. That's from my perspective.
So again, I want to come back to hope, and I want to come back to another thing you just said a second ago. You talked about telling a story. Everyone in my life is bored of listening to me. I'm like a broken record on this question of the need for this committee. If its goal is to get to the bottom of what happened, it also needs to be able to tell that story in a way that cable coverage mid-afternoon on a Thursday is not going to break through, and that there needs to be some kind of elevated effort at storytelling if this committee is really going to break through with the American people. And so when I saw you talk to CBS and say that it was that primetime hearings were being considered, I was heartened by that, whatever the results of them are, not in a partisan way, but just in this story needs to be told.
And then there's industrial grade software.
Russian playbook of creating themselves as a victim, both for Vladimir Putin to be seen as strong at home and then also to try to project strength overseas and toward
Red Bull.
Honeywell.
Nation when it comes to travel and tourism recovery.
Everywhere.
In our health lead, teachers, police officers, hospital staff, airport officials, just some of the 700,000 Americans testing positive for COVID every single day, meaning millions are stuck at home sick, isolating, quarantining. As CNN's Nick Watt reports, that is fueling major disruptions to everyday life and the economy.
In Los Angeles, more than 60,000 school staff and students have tested positive in the run-up to reopening. In New York, trash lies uncollected, 3 subway lines are closed, so many city staff are out sick. Across Colorado, so many EMTs are out, they're now turning away some non-urgent callers. Upwards of 5 million Americans will be stuck at home over the coming days, says one economist, all down to the Omicron tsunami.
Don't you know? Red Bull gives you wings.
So teammates, put on your headphones. You have a chance.
Years ago.
We don't really need to say it. We just know what that expectation's like every time we step on the ice for each other.
Winter Olympics quickly approaching. Still to come here at 4 o'clock, a dog that was missing in the wilderness for months, finding his way back to his owners. That remarkable rescue just ahead.
Sports when you want it with Dakota News Now.
Catch Dakota News Now at 9 on Fox Sioux Falls. It's news when you want it.
Looking for some exciting.
Baroni.
Oh, that sounds good.
Jobs in the NFL up to this point. Brian Flores is out in Miami. Vic Fangio's out in Denver. And Matt Nagy is out in Chicago. Which of these jobs do you think would be the best head coaching job to fill?
I'll probably say Minnesota, maybe. And I don't know if it's because I love Justin Jefferson so much, the first receiver to have 3,000 yards in his first 2 seasons. But they also have Dalvin Cook. I just like their offensive weapons. You know, Kirk Cousins clearly has been a veteran quarterback, not a great quarterback. He wouldn't be the guy I want long term. Obviously, he's an older player. But I know who I want to give this job to. Brian Flores. That's who should have this job, Brian Flores. And let me tell you why. He was a defensive coordinator of the Patriots. Usually their former coaches are terrible against Bill Belichick. Did you know that the Dolphins beat them twice this year?
2 times.
Did you know the Dolphins won 7 of their final 8 games, navigating the turbulence of whether they were going to get Deshaun Watson or not? Tua dealt with some injury. He was in and out of the lineup, and he continued to keep them steady and prove that he's a fine coach. And I have to just say this just as a black man, right, Jacoby? This highlights so many things we talk about in power situations in professional sports, in particular the NFL. When you look at ownership, not represented. Look at presidents and general managers, rarely represented. As head coaches, seemingly have to be head and shoulders better than your white counterparts. Let me give you a perfect example of that. Who coaches the Detroit Lions?
Dan Campbell.
Dan Campbell. And today there are human beings, and this is a Lions fan. Today there are human beings telling each other that he's doing a great job, that he's the man for the job, right? Did y'all remember what happened the first 12, 14 weeks of the season?
Yes.
Right? Because when you look at him, right, his bar is lower. Look at somebody like Mike Tomlin. 15 straight winning seasons, won 8 of the last 9 games, got his team into the playoffs. It seems that when we get in that position, that we have to be extraordinary in most cases in order to maintain that level of opportunity. He did a good job with this Miami Dolphins team. If you're beating the Patriots and you're playing well and you're continuing, and by the way, it ain't his fault that they, quote unquote, took Tua over Justin Herbert, but Herbert's watching the playoffs just like Tua is. And I don't know if they're gonna fire their coach. So it's just a bizarre firing. I know he's gonna land on his feet really soon, and I believe that job should be the answer to your question. My pick is the best remaining job, the best current job is Minnesota.
Well, I'm glad you brought up Dan Campbell and your Lions because, again, another game that I bet on. I assumed the Lions were going to lose because that's what they always do. They were motivated to lose to get the #1 pick. However, what did they do? What did the Lions do? Came out and won the game. No Hutchinson for them. They can't even lose right. All they do is lose, and when they're supposed to lose, they can't lose. Jalen, as a Lions fan, what do you think about their win over the Packers?
So first and foremost, I'm supposed to be in Indianapolis right now doing the show because the Michigan Wolverines should be playing against the Alabama Crimson Tide tonight. So since that's not happening, I was like, you know what? I'm not going to be able to see Hutchinson play again. Wait, if we don't win this weekend, we get a chance to draft the #1 overall prospect from the Michigan Wolverines.
Flores was perhaps involved in trying to get Deshaun Watson into town, therefore their relationship fractured. That would be the best guess, the only real reason why they should.
Do you think this is just as much Flores wanting out as Ross wanting to move on?
No, I think it's just a very miscommunication between him and the quarterback and just not a very good relationship, and Flores sort of being out of luck.
Frank Isola.
Now, Brian Flores' record after 3 seasons was just about where Tony Soprano was, Joe Philbin, Adam Gase. He was trending in an upward direction. Clearly, this is above him. This is ownership and management disconnected with the head coach. I think he was connected with the players in his locker room, but I think ownership and the GM, I think they have unrealistic expectations. They picked the quarterback when they could have picked Justin Herbert, so they made the wrong move here.
Yeah, it's particularly disappointing because, again, as a brother, this guy is in a position where he's always looked at as the excuse as to why something didn't happen. And the question with black head coaches in this league is not about the first chance. It's about whether or not they get a second chance. He's a good enough coach, and I think that he will, but ultimately that's why this is just a bad look. It seems like there's always a reason why you got to get rid of that guy as opposed to somebody else and keeping him around. I don't like it.
Spain.
Yes, and Stephen Ross took over. There have been 3 winning seasons. He accounted for 2 of them. They were back-to-back. He was also 4-2 against Belichick. This is a guy that needed to be given more time to continue succeeding. This is unfathomable and doesn't make any sense unless what Izzy's saying is right, which is that he was pushing for someone like Deshaun and Ross wanted to go with Tua.
Look at those scores today. Clinton Yates, Frank Isola, 19 times. Sarah Spain, Israel Gutierrez. Showdown, 2 minutes.
These fudge brownie M&Ms are really fudgy.
Yes, they are.
To put a fudge brownie center in an M&M's is...
Genius. I know.
I was going to say hard.
Why won't you?
Why won't you go in?
Fudge brownie M&Ms.
I always dreamed of...
That's what I see from Ja. And for the casuals that's going to talk about Memphis today...
And I'm Leslie. We're the owners of Love Marlowe in Sioux Falls. This holiday...
Focus Factor.
Focus Factor has been clinically shown to improve memory.
And then now all of a sudden they say, you know what? We're
telling the Post, quote, Trump would dial Hannity and Lou Dobbs, whose Fox Business show was canceled in February, dial them into Oval Office staff meetings. Stephanie Grisham, former press secretary to President Donald Trump, remembers the challenges that came from so many Fox News hosts having the direct number to reach Trump in the White House residence. There were times the president would come down the next morning and say, well, Sean thinks we should do this, or Janine thinks we should do that, said Grisham, referring to Sean Hannity and Janine Pirro, both of whom host primetime Fox News shows. And now, in yet another sign that there is very little daylight between Fox News and Trump world, Fox News announced today that Jesse Waters will be the host of the 7 p.m. hour. Waters, another of favorite of Trump's. Former president even issued an endorsement of Waters' book earlier this year. One that, I love this endorsement. It cribbed lines directly from the book's publisher, a classic Trump blurb. Waters' past is littered with a list, an array, an endless stream of racist, homophobic comments. Most recently, his call for young conservatives to, quote, ambush Dr. Anthony Fauci, a man who has received plenty of death threats. That led Fauci to call for Waters to be fired, and instead, Jesse Waters today promoted to prime time. Now,
that I try Prevagen.
We have coming in with us the following guests: Phil Rucker,
Marilyn Monroe, Sunday at 9.
To your doctor. Ask your doctor about.
Awesome. Yeah, she's an incredible human. So I get.
With access to finance.
Now available for fast sinus relief.
Fierce and perceptive and scathing a critic of your former friends in the Republican Party as anybody I know, and I know you're not a big fan of Fox News Channel, but what does it say to you that Jesse Waters, a guy who the last time we talked about him on the show, we talked about him because he was telling people they should ambush and take a kill shot at Tony Fauci, that man's now one of the main faces of Fox News in prime time?
Well, it tells you that the arc of Fox News is bending toward more clown car, more recklessness, more extremism. Anyone who thought that you would have a certain sobriety or shift to the middle on the part of Fox, look what the lineup is looking like. Look, I mean, this symbiotic relationship between the Fox hosts and Donald Trump is not really a surprise. There's been a lot of reporting about all of this, about the rise and the dominance of the entertainment wing and Donald Trump's obsession. But what's really extraordinary is to watch the duplicity, the two-faced approach of what people like Sean Hannity say in private in their text messages, and then what they tell their audience. Laura Ingraham saying one thing in private, another thing in public. So I think that anyone who doubted what's happened to Fox News, I think we're not learning anything particularly new, but it's certainly being documented rather graphically.
Kim, talk to me about Jesse Waters and what we can expect to hear from him if his brand of commentary that he's been spouting to the great offense to many people of many different persuasions and stripes for a long time, if he brings that now to prime time, what are we going to hear on Fox News in the 7 p.m. hour?
You know, John, I can't even imagine. I don't want to repeddle or characterize what he has said in the past. I think you've already done a good job of that. But what this says to me is this idea that Fox News would try to recalibrate itself post-Trump, to try to return to something that resembles a news network is not going to happen. We have seen really qualified journalists that used to work there all abandoning ship within the last couple of years, with Chris Wallace being the most glaring example of people who have finally had enough, even though they were trying to bring a modicum of actual newsworthiness and reporting to that organization. It seems that has all been given.
Question I get when I'm working in my clinic.
And by doing that, they are going to have every Trump acolyte that they can sign.
Options and implement sweeping federal changes to voting laws. All as Senate Democrats prepared to vote on both as soon as.
Israel, answer this. This is the best block you've seen since when?
For me, aesthetically speaking strictly, is since LaFonso Ellis as a Denver Nugget went up and grabbed it with one hand and brought it down.
Oh, I love that one.
But they're probably right there side by side, those two, because him hitting his head on the rim is the perfect kicker. I'm sorry, in the backboard, perfect kicker.
I'm so sorry, I can't answer this because it's a wrong question. That's not a block. That's an interception.
And then at 10 o'clock, the number 1 and the number 2 teams in the Eastern Conference face off. It is the Nets taking on the Bulls.
Yeah, John, it certainly was a symbiotic relationship. And my colleagues Ashley Parker and Josh Stassi have this great piece delving into it and trying to connect some of those dots. What we know from our coverage of the Trump White House over those 4 years is that the former president would watch Fox News almost every night religiously, sort of addicted to Sean Hannity's show, to Laura Ingraham's show, to Judge Janine's show on Sunday evenings. And in turn, those hosts would communicate directly into the camera things that they wanted the president to prioritize, policies they would want him to take up, rhetoric they would want him to use in his speeches like the State of the Union or in the tweets that he would issue on social media. And it worked both ways. Trump, in turn, would get on the phone and talk to these hosts and encourage them to peddle certain messages on their shows and to their viewers. Trump had this belief that Fox was the voice, the id of his movement. Fox only has a few million viewers out there in the country, but Trump believed that they spoke for his MAGA movement, for his supporters. And so he thought in order to win over his supporters and maintain their loyalty and allegiance, he had to follow what the Fox hosts were telling him to do.
Asian hate crimes, and this guy's going to supercharge what's going to be happening when his policies are implemented, and he's going to be the face of the crime wave. And he seems confused as to why there's this immediate blowback. You can't hide as a public official in New York.
Hearing that question since even before I joined the Senate last year. And here's my take. I think it's worth the risk. If we're able to massage the rules of the Senate to advance critical issues like voter protection and defending voting rights, things like an aggressive climate change agenda, things like labor protections, protecting equality, and so much more, then I don't worry about losing the majority in the Senate.
What could go wrong?
I'd like to talk to you about the people who think the Confederate generals are great.
They may win a championship before long. But, Tony, I don't have to wait till last night. I had said weeks ago, what is he doing? And, by the way, what defensively was his team doing? He says they wanted to put
There have been 6 regular season rematches eventually in the bowl game. The winner of the first game lost the rematch every time and only covered one of those. There's been a clear split in this game.
Yards instead of 54. So I blame him for his team missing the playoffs, but not for the reason most people will.
So I want to go to the background for a second, to the setup, and I want to start with the fact that the biggest choke job of the year was the Indianapolis Colts.
No question.
I mean, don't tell me that they lost earlier in the year to Jacksonville. The playoffs are on the line. You have to win that game. That is a terrible loss. Pittsburgh, I'm going to give Roethlisberger credit, especially in the overtime on 3rd and 4th down passes. He was absolutely terrific, but he's done, Mike. We both know he cannot throw the ball down the field more than 10 or 12 yards. Yeah. So I'm glad he won his last 2 games, and now you can go home and feel good about everything. And now to the Raiders and the Chargers. Justin Herbert in the 4th quarter was sensational. Yeah. He made 6 4th down passing conversions for first downs and or touchdowns. He was absolutely tremendous. By himself, I thought he was going to win. I don't particularly blame Staley, but I'm going to get to something. I'm going to give you credit, Mike. For years and years and years, it doesn't matter who the coach is with the Chargers. Doesn't matter who the quarterback is. You said they take a nap.
They do.
They take a nap.
Yeah.
They lose these games, and sometimes in excruciating ways, Mike.
Yes, the truth. By the way, if we're going to dole out some praise, and that's deserved, okay, let's dole out some criticism. Carson Wentz, Pennsylvania. Wentz has got to be one of the best 50 players in the league. Carson Wentz attaches himself to losing. He didn't win the Super Bowl. Yes, he led his team there. He didn't win that game. And since then, Tony, you keep taking the chance. I don't mean you personally, but people, experts, former players want to roll with Carson Wentz. How's that looking now? Things look pretty good in the second quarter for your Super Bowl pick, Tone. The Rams were up 17-0 over the rival Niners in Los Angeles.
Matchmakers on the edge. So I still like Bama here.
That's the one thing. The
ballot in state after state. You can't have it both ways. And yes, we did have record turnout in the last election, but is it right to have people wait 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 hours in line to be able to exercise their right to vote? Of course not. So the voter suppression practices
speeds at 50 American airports beginning next week. The FAA restricting the new 5G spectrum at some of the country's busiest travel hubs. The ban lasting for at least 6 months due to potential signal interference with aircraft instruments. Impacted airports include JFK, LAX, and O'Hare. Other busy airports like Atlanta, Boston, and Washington, D.C. will not restrict 5G. Earth is reaching a critical threshold. New data by the European Union's climate change service showing Earth's temperature continues to rise. The group, which tracks global temperature and other climate indicators, says 2021 was the 5th warmest year on record. Scientists say every decade has been warmer than the previous, and that is likely to continue. According to the report, Earth's average temperature is about 1.1 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. Well, we have some lovely sunsets for this afternoon, Tyler. The weather also not as bitterly cold.
No, and still a little cool out there, kind of like what we dealt with yesterday, but overall we have some much warmer weather returning the next couple of days, which will be nice because it has been so cold as of late, like you mentioned, and certainly not too bad otherwise.
Who you got confidence in? You got confidence in the Cardinals? You got who you want to pick? You got confidence in Buffalo with some of the losses they had?
I got confidence in the Packers hosting games
except
when it's going to be 10 below
they
0.
Don't cash in on those. Because as great as Aaron Rodgers has been with his 27 MVPs, he got 1. He's got half as many as Ben Roethlisberger. He's got a third of the number of trips to the Super Bowl as Ben Roethlisberger. So I ain't trusting the Packers. And granted, I may have a little, grudge on. But Tony, I'm going back to that game. You apparently were not paying attention to Matthew Stafford for the previous 10 years of his career, like some of us in the Midwest, where we saw him 2, 4, 6 times a year. And I didn't know why you picked him to be the MVP, because there was nothing there in the previous years. He's a fine quarterback. I'd like to have him on my team all these years up until now. But you put a lot of confidence in him, and I don't know why you had it.
Well, I will just say this, that you could say that the Rams are still okay because they host Arizona next week.
Yeah, they'll beat them.
But Arizona's 8-1 on the road, and they beat them 37-20 in L.A. the last time. So I
can't trust Arizona.
Don't have a lot of confidence. Yeah. The axe has fallen on a bunch of NFL coaches and general managers. Vic Fangio was fired yesterday by Denver after going 19-30. Today, Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace were canned by Chicago. Mike Zimmer and Rick Spielman are out in Minnesota. Nagy and Zimmer had winning records overall, though not this year. But the biggest surprise was the Dolphins firing Brian Flores. He won 8 of his last 9 games. He had winning records in each of his last 2 seasons. Wilbon, what do you make of this?
I don't know what to make of it, except it's the NFL. Brian Flores, really? His team responds like that? His team goes in the dumper. Most teams, if not all, 1-7, they're looking for time in Cancun. What are the Dolphins doing? I don't know what they're doing. I don't know what ownership there is ever doing. There have been a series of bizarre decisions in recent years. Now, that's Flores. And the Flores thing, it's just, I want to hear more to come out of there. I want to know what the players think of him, if they defend him, if they stand up for him. There's a lot I want to hear in the coming days about Flores in Miami. Yeah. The other situations, Tone, you can dismiss everybody. And some of those, they deserve to be dismissed. I think the Bears, more than anything. I'm as glad that Pace has been dismissed as I am Nagy. Because Pace seemed to be the arrogant guy who thought he was God's gift to executive life in the NFL. And you say, oh, you got 8 years and you can't put together an offensive line? So there's some situations like Minnesota, clear them out too. I had no problem with that, even though Spielman might have been somewhat of a surprise. But, Tony, this is what happens the Monday after the final week in the NFL.
Yeah, we're still waiting to see what the Giants do with Joe Judge.
Fire him. They're going to can him,
we know
too.
The GM announced that he was going to step aside and retire after this. Let me get to Flores for a second, because it is baffling to me personally how this could happen. I look at a guy who works for an owner that everybody says, the owner said, this is not my guy to move forward. I'm not on the inside, Mike. On the outside, Flores looked like the one guy who came out of the Belichick tree in New England who knew what he was doing.
Yeah.
All right. Now, then the owner also said, I'm not after Harbaugh. I'm not going to be the guy to take Harbaugh out of Michigan, because he's a Michigan man too.
Guy, yeah.
But if Harbaugh goes to the Bears, is he going to let him go to the Bears, or is he going to wait for Harbaugh to call him up and say, I'm ready to go and I'm ready to work for you at this point? In the owner's case, I look at the owner, Steve Ross, in the same way that I look at Shad Khan in Jacksonville, and I wonder, do these guys have a clue about what's going on in the NFL? Because I believe that Ross has been there for 12 years. They made the playoffs 1 year, Mike. They had 3 winning seasons, and Flores just had 2 of them.
And he
had
cans
2
them,
of them.
fires them.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
So
That's why I want to hear more reaction coming out of South Florida. Maybe some players will now stand up for their coach, who they just played their butts off for. They did.
I'll tell you this. If you want to read reaction, read Greg Cody in the Miami Herald, because he crushes the guy. Let's take a break. Coming up, would you rather be Alabama or Georgia heading into tonight's national?
Yeah, so split in Indianapolis and split here as well. I'll agree with the
Relief Factor created the 3-week quick.
And we continue to have the story, which is that that many of these cases are not as serious as they used to be in the old days. The thing I'm interested in, though, is in this shift, this subtle shift that seems to be taking place in both in the Biden administration, in the private sector, and to some extent the cultural conversation. This notion of COVID transitioning from being pandemic to endemic. Tell me what you think about that, and whether that's valid and justified right now, and how we're going to get there if it's right and proper.
Yeah, so first of all, thanks for having me back. I would say there are 2 sets of issues going on. Right now, like today, we have an emergency. We have an extraordinary number of infections, more hospitalizations than we've seen, hospitals at the breaking point. And so we have got to manage this surge. And so it may seem funny to even talk about long-term living with it. But I think the point here is we, of course, have to manage the emergency. Most of the hospital beds are filling up with unvaccinated people or high-risk people who did not get the booster. But while we manage that, while we keep infection numbers low, we do have to begin to talk about what happens when this surge is over. How do we stop going from surge after surge, emergency to emergency, and figure out how to live with a virus that's going to be around for the rest of our lives?
Saget say, tell him to go F himself. So that's what my point being this is that Saget probably would hate tributes about this. Like he's like, even though he played the nice guy, he had a dirty mind. Anybody who knows him will tell.
Are going down a little bit, but a dozen cruise ships have been docked over the last week at major cruise lines. Royal Caribbean just docked 4 of its ships, it says, out of an abundance of caution. That cruise line requires that passengers be fully vaccinated, but just last week, one of its ships had to turn back to Hong Kong because of a COVID scare on board. Remember that the CDC just 2 weeks ago advised Americans not to go on cruises regardless of their vaccination status, Jake.
So are most airlines
in the median? The roads are bad, so please slow down.
Remember to slow down and please don't crowd the plow.
Dakota News Now is sponsored by Billion Automotive.
Temperatures right now still rather cool, at least over the immediate Dakota News Now viewing area, but that's about to change over these next couple of days as this ridge of high pressure builds in and all that warmer air makes its way in as well. So much warmer air tomorrow, Wednesday, and Thursday. But then something to take note of is what's going to happen on Friday. And you could even start to see this in the jet stream. We're going to be tracking the system that's going to be quickly making its way through from Canada, and we'll look to bring some accumulating snowfall to parts of at least eastern South Dakota, and more so just off to our east in parts of Minnesota and Iowa. Otherwise, we're going to be staying dry until that time. First Alert Live Doppler radar generally staying pretty clear across the entire area. Cooler to the north and east, single-digit temperatures, but further off to the west, look at that, 50s and 60s can be found. Much warmer air, and the wind is still coming in from the south, so that is helping to bring in some of that warmer air overall. Now, the wind's not too strong at the moment, but it will be picking up quite a bit tomorrow and still out of the south and southeast. Wind chills, not bad. Most of us are still above 0, with the exceptions of places like Sisseton, where it still feels like 10 degrees below 0. Temperatures tomorrow morning actually going to be on the rise, and by tomorrow afternoon, all of us finally back above freezing. 30s and 40s across the area, mild start to the day on Wednesday too, and overall we're going to keep this weather pattern around these next few days. Temperatures not changing too terribly much. One difference tomorrow, now there will be a kind of a quick moving cold front that makes its way through. Not really going to be having a major impact on our area other than it'll be making for some breezy conditions behind it. We'll see wind speeds between 15 and 25 miles an hour at times, but that will quickly die down tomorrow night and into Wednesday, so not going to be sticking around too terribly long. Futurecast, clear skies tonight, and we'll be looking at a couple of passing clouds every now and again for the day tomorrow, but overall still staying pretty quiet. As we head into tomorrow night and Wednesday, a few extra clouds do make their way through briefly. Looking to stay dry, although there's a chance of this kind of a quick move.
Football more, and I think you're going to see a bunch of quick passes to the perimeter, to James Cook, to Brock Bowers, to those guys.
It is. You could see all that from my hand? Yes, but not from that one.
There he is. Only pay for what you need.
To take down the former president is now over, and one of the people in the room, so to speak, will be our guest after this quick break, so you are not going to want to miss this. Don't go anywhere.
If you've had a vaccine or plan to, tell your doctor if your Crohn's disease symptoms to
security check every single month. Call now.
Tried to contact me about this case. No investigator, no detective.
They did something wrong in the past, not because it's right for now. What they're doing is, of course, wrong to these women who are trying to participate in sports and engage in competition. That's not the part you're concerned about, and that's the part that I find most disconcerting.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. We are out of time, but we appreciate both of you joining us tonight. Hannah Simpson and Tony Katz, we appreciate it. I know it's a difficult and tough topic to talk about. We're glad you joined us. Thank you both.
Take care.
Thank you both.
4.5 million Americans quit their jobs in November. So why does our next guest, CEO, say the Great Resignation?
Tonight on additional charges.
On Saturday, someone called police about a car that was blocking the entrance of an apartment complex. When officers arrived on scene, they found Leroy Kiles of T in the car. Police say he was a parole absconder and had a warrant out for his arrest. Officers also found more than 6 grams of meth and 2 grams of marijuana.
Good catch by a citizen to call in a vehicle that looked out of place. Somebody that was actually wanted by the state for not keeping up with their parole, and took a little bit of drugs off the street for us.
According to the jail website, Kiles was on parole for a prior drug and eluding charge.
A Sioux Falls judge who has presided over some of the state's most heinous crimes is retiring. Judge Bradley Zell made that announcement today. Tonight at 10, Don Jorgensen sits down with the 61-year-old to find out why he's retiring now as he reflects on a 20-year career as a judge and how he feels about sending 2 inmates to die by lethal injection.
The South Dakota Department of Health provides free at-home
of blinding smoke that quickly spread throughout the 19-story building, preventing some from finding their way out early Sunday. This man is praying for his brother and sister-in-law. They lived on the 18th floor. He still has not heard from them.
I'm totally worried and devastated that not me alone, but the whole community and the family at large. Everybody's like worried. We don't know what's happening.
Daisy Mitchell survived by running down a darkened stairwell after first opening her door and smelling smoke.
I went to the stairs to open the door. It just blew me back in the house, and I panicked, and I told my husband, let me in the house. I can't see. I'm blind. I can't see. I can't see. If I stayed out there another 3 seconds, I would have been gone, too.
An outpouring of messages of support now coming from across the globe. Many of the residents here have ties to Gambia and the Dominican Republic. The White House reaching out, offering support, while members of the clergy gathered, asking everyone to keep victims in their prayers.
Lord God, we know that you are the God.
That's it for us.
Have a great evening, everyone.
Tonight, the new information that we're learning about New York City's deadliest fire in decades and the warning about space heaters just as a cold Arctic blast takes aim at the Northeast. At least 17 people killed, including 8 children. But the concern tonight that the death toll could rise with more than a dozen still hospitalized. The horrifying account of a woman who narrowly escaped.
I was hearing people, yell, help me, help me.
New vaccines, Omicron shots could be ready by March. What you need to know. Plus, we go inside the largest children's hospital where there's a record number of kids hospitalized. Tax delay? Could COVID impact your refund check? Russian threat. With Russian troops amassing on the Ukraine border, we're on the front lines tonight. Remembering America's TV dad. Fans and fellow comedians react to the sudden death of the Full House and America's Funniest Home Video star. And the news tonight from the Medical Examiner. Advantage Djokovic. The world's top tennis player vows to play after his visa victory. But could the immigration minister still stand in his way? National blood crisis. Our exclusive reporting as blood banks warn doctors may need to postpone life-saving treatments. And cooking up a dream and a future in Harlem.
This is the CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell, reporting from the nation's capital.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us on this Monday night. We want to begin with the latest on that deadly apartment fire in the Bronx that killed 17, including 8 children. Investigators are looking into whether a self-closing door malfunctioned that allowed smoke to spread through the New York City high-rise, turning the stairwells into a death trap. Now, the cause of the fire is being blamed on an electric space heater. More on that in just a minute. Meanwhile, more than a dozen others remain hospitalized, including several in critical condition. And New York City's mayor warned today that the death toll could rise. CBS's Nancy Chen is at the scene. Good evening, Nancy.
Nora, good evening to you. We have just learned that federal regulators have opened an investigation into whether the space heater that sparked this fire was defective. Firefighters have described battling thick smoke to save people inside, even as their oxygen tanks began to empty.
Large flames and heavy smoke shot out of the second and third floor windows of this Bronx high-rise. Just as Karen DeJesus says she was about to feed her son.
I was hearing people yell, help me, and I realized that it was really a fire.
DeJesus ran to the back room of her third floor apartment as it started to fill with smoke. Firefighters used ladders to get her out.
You climbed out through the window.
Yeah, it's very scary.
The fire started in a bedroom of a third floor duplex apartment after a space heater malfunctioned. Investigators are looking into whether the safety doors designed to close in the event of a fire also malfunctioned or if they were propped open, allowing smoke to spread quickly throughout the 19-story building. New York City Mayor Eric Adams toured the devastation today.
Mayor Adams, you just came from inside this building. What did you see inside?
Looking at the apartment where the space heater was located, the grandmother had burns to her feet. That's how they woke up, feeling the heat from the fire. Just really intense.
Space heaters are linked to more than 25,000 house fires every year, resulting in more than 300 deaths in the United States. Today, the FDNY issued these reminders. Keep space heaters at least 3 feet away from bedding or curtains. Don't use in a bathroom, and never use an extension cord.
You had emphasized the importance of fire safety, closing the door. Why is that important?
It's crucial. The number of lives we lost were due not to actually fire, but smoke. And something simple as closing the door can allow firefighters to respond and save lives.
17 people lost their lives in this tragedy. It comes less than a week after an apartment fire in Philadelphia claimed the lives of 12 people.
And Mayor Adams called this a global tragedy because many of the victims are immigrants from Gambia and West Africa. Now, an online fundraiser to help those impacted has already raised more than $500,000 in just one day, Nora.
Nancy Chen in the Bronx, thanks. Well, a blast of cold Arctic air has temperatures plummeting.
Smoke even after many of their oxygen tanks ran out. A woman named Renee on the 19th floor put a white towel out her window, alerting firefighters.
I heard a banging on the door,
and it was a firefighter. It was just like an angel knocking on my door.
And tonight, some families still searching for loved ones.
Like my cousin, I heard that his 3 children passed away, but we don't know where the wife is. I don't know where's my cousin and his wife. Yeah, now I'm trying to go to the hospitals and look for them.
And some terrified residents tried to make it out of the building, but were overwhelmed by smoke. Firefighters finding people in stairwells on every floor. And we've learned those 8 children who died ranged in age from 12 to just 4 years old. But David, a little bit of good news we've just learned. Authorities saying those who live on the upper floors will be able to return to their homes as early as tonight. David.
But the loss just staggering, and Janae back on the scene for us tonight. Janae, we appreciate it. As I mentioned off the top tonight, we're also tracking alarming new numbers in the pandemic tonight. The number of hospitalizations in this country now setting an all-time record since this pandemic started. More than 141,000 Americans are now in the hospital. So many hospitals barely keeping up because so many of their own staff have COVID too. Tonight, the controversy in California, allowing frontline workers to return to the hospital even if they have COVID, as long as they're asymptomatic. Many are questioning this. And the new numbers just in on children as well tonight. The number of cases up 78% in just a week. ABC's Stephanie Ramos tonight.
Tonight, the number of COVID-positive Americans in hospitals now reaching a new pandemic record. More than 141,000 patients pushing hospitals to the brink of collapse.
This surge that we're experiencing now is the largest volume of patients that have been the sickest. So in many ways, this has been the worst.
In New Jersey, the number of patients in the ICU and needing ventilators doubling since Christmas to levels not seen since May of 2020.
We're in the thick of this latest fight against the Omicron tsunami washing across the state.
And now deaths are climbing too. 1,500 Americans are dying of COVID every day, a 34% increase in the last week. And even with a less severe Omicron variant, the sheer number of infections is overwhelming hospitals.
Our health systems were just never designed for an epidemic of this magnitude. And so unfortunately, we will bring our health systems to collapse if we don't figure out a way to keep transmission down in the community.
But with infections spiking, at least 1 in 4 hospitals across the country report they're facing a critical staffing shortage. It's why California is changing its rules to allow asymptomatic healthcare workers who test positive to return without isolating or testing negative. But the nurses union and other workers are calling that move dangerous.
We're in this industry to care for others. You know, that's the root word right there. And yet we are asking to put others at potential harm.
And in Los Angeles, there is worry of staffing shortages as schools reopen tomorrow. Students and staff have to test negative, but 62,000 tests have already come back positive.
People are having a hard time. People are afraid. This is a tough situation to be in.
Tonight, new COVID cases among children spiking to 580,000 cases, up 78% in the last week. In Chicago, classes canceled for a 4th day after a stalemate between the city and teachers. The union accusing the mayor of refusing to compromise on expanded testing and remote learning.
The mayor is being relentless, but she's being relentlessly stupid. She's being relentlessly stubborn.
As schools and workplaces push for higher quality masks, the latest research done before Omicron shows the dramatic difference an upgraded mask can make. Studies estimated for 2 people wearing cloth masks, it can take about a half hour to spread the virus from one infected person to an uninfected person in the same room. If they are both wearing surgical masks, it can take about an hour. And if they're both wearing N95 masks, it can take about 25 hours to cause an infection.
The higher grade masks are really going to protect people because they not only have a more proper fit, they have a better seal, but they also have a better filtration device, and they have an electrostatic potential to actually repel away the virus.
Super important, the level of these masks, to track them. Stephanie back with us. And Stephanie, I know the White House had promised to send out 500 million rapid test kits to homes across the country starting in January. We keep tracking this. It's now January 10th, and we're learning this is still weeks away.
Yes, David, the first tests will be sent out at the end of January, but by the time all 500 million tests are sent out, the Omicron peak could be on the decline. In the meantime, starting this Saturday, Americans can buy up to 8 at-home rapid tests per month and get reimbursed by insurance. Just make sure to keep that receipt.
That's right.
David.
Insurance has to cover 8 kits a month. Great news, Stephanie. Thank you. Now to the Arctic blast across much of the country. 10 states under alerts right now. The coldest air of the season in some places. It could be the coldest in years. These temperatures across several states moving into the Northeast tonight. In New York City and Boston, wind chills well below zero.
Minerals are great. What an unfortunate time for the music to drop.
New Kenan tonight on NBC.
Border controls keeping families apart. 92% of the population aged 16 and over is
relatively decent answer in my opinion.
You know, Juan, the situation with Chicago teachers now on its 4th day looks like it's going to be a 5th day without classes. We just did a piece tonight about the mental health toll that this COVID pandemic has had on kids specifically. Is there this moment that the president could have a Ronald Reagan air traffic controller kind of moment with Chicago teachers unions?
Well, unlike the air traffic controllers, the Chicago teachers are not under the control of the President of the United States. That's under the city of Chicago, and of course the Chicago Teachers Union is its own political ship here. They're the ones that are insisting, despite what we hear from the mayor, Lori Lightfoot, that she wants schools open. So you understand the power of that union, but it's not similar to President Reagan, who had direct power over the air traffic controllers union and could fire them and replace them. Now, I will say that to me, in this conversation, I'm just alarmed that, people don't deal with the fact that I think it's 36% or so of the country remains unvaccinated. And when you hear from the doctors about the strain on our healthcare systems, they're saying it's overwhelming. It's close to 100% of the people who are in the hospitals for COVID are the unvaccinated.
Kimberly, Dr. Scott Gottlieb, former head of the FDA, somebody we listen to as a respected source. Here's what he says about why this virus is spreading.
This is an epidemic that's not being instigated, spread, if you will, by people who get diagnosed, isolate for 5 days, and go back into public circulation on day 6. While a certain percentage of them will still be infectious, they're not driving the pandemic. What's driving the pandemic right now is the fact that we're probably only diagnosing somewhere between 1 in 5 and 1 in 10 actual infections. And there's a lot of people walking around with mild illness or asymptomatic infection who don't know it, who are spreading it.
Thoughts?
Yeah, I think that raises this important question about whether or not we need to take a new look at the testing overall and what value there is anymore of doing all of this testing, in particular to allow people to go into venues, etc. When it's not really catching all the people who are out there. It is driving a lot of panic, as Brett mentioned. When you look at those numbers, the numbers that really should matter are those about how many people are actually going to the hospital with this and ending up on ventilators, and questions like you were asking the CDC director. And weirdly, that's the information we're not getting. Most of the data we're getting is a bunch of noise. And you have some European countries now thinking of stepping back from this, because if we are going to have to live with this as a new normal, this testing situation can't continue the way it is.
Yeah, Britt, quickly, now we have this mandate that health insurance companies are going to pick up the free home testing, and you get 8 per person, 32 for a family of 4. The problem is right now you can't get them. They're saying they're coming, but we're going from trying to get tests and analyzing the effectiveness of tests to everybody gets a test.
Well, not only can you not get the test, even if you do get the test, they tell you on one day whether you have it. The next day you might have it. So you do, 8 tests or 8 days maybe?
We've heard you're now in office, and I want to show viewers what you've immediately done, because you have new guidelines where you say in most of these types of cases, without aggravating factors, you won't be going after and seeking jail for marijuana, skipping public fares, trespassing, resisting arrest, prostitution. Explain to us what you're doing and how you think this can benefit justice and still safety, which is your job in the big city of New York.
Safety is paramount, Ari.
your first civil right is the right to walk safely to your corner store. That's been the focus of my career. For those who don't know, I've been a federal and state prosecutor doing the full range from gun possession to armed robbery. My focus has been keeping New Yorkers safe. And for me, this comes from personal experience. Before I turned 21, I've been shot at, had a semi-automatic weapon put to my head, a homicide victim on my doorstep. And so I know this work personally. We're going to give primacy to those kind of serious crimes just mentioned, armed robbery, guns, gun trafficking. The things that were just on your screen are not matters that at least the people I'm talking to, and I've crisscrossed Manhattan the last couple of years, are sitting around their kitchen table talking about. I will drop one footnote, because you had resisting arrest up there, and I want to make clear, I've prosecuted people who have assaulted police officers. I take that tremendously important, that kind of conduct, and has to be held accountable. So resisting arrest is there for the sole circumstance when that's the only charge, right? The only criminal thing charged is the resisting arrest, which then begs the question, what was the arrest for? But people who
dig in,
punch
sir,
police officers.
Yeah, let me jump in there. Let's dig in on that, because it's a huge issue right now, and you're actually trying to be the change. A lot of talk about criminal justice reform. You mentioned your background, and you're trying to actually both do safety, but maybe in a different, less punitive way. And I think our viewers understand from the data that might also mean a less racist way historically. The new police commissioner, who's your colleague, of course, is zeroing in right in on the arrest part in a new memo to her officers, saying that your new rules will make them less safe. So speak to that, because on the one hand, you just referred to something that a lot of civil rights advocates care about, which is police stop someone, they don't find a crime, then they get arrested for resisting arrest, but what was the underlying crime? And that seems unfair. On the other hand, you got your new colleague and commissioner here, first couple weeks, saying you might be endangering officers.
So look, I look forward to working with the commissioner. We've been in touch. We're going to talk about these issues. We share, the goal of public safety for Manhattan, in my case, all of New York City in the commissioner's case. And that's why I draw this distinction. I think there was some perhaps misunderstanding in terms of our legal document, which was prepared for our lawyers inside, and sort of the public consumption of it. People who punch and hit police officers will be held accountable. I've done that kind of work. That's important. But as I said, when the only charge is a resisting arrest and there's no assault, there's no punch, that's, I think, different. And I think the people of Manhattan understand that. I'm profoundly focused on the fact that I sit behind the desk as a lawyer, prepare a search warrant, prepare an arrest warrant, and then our law enforcement officers go out and put themselves in harm's way. Their safety is of paramount importance to me.
And do you think the new mayor
save an average of $800?
Is American democracy Wednesday and Thursday? Then there's that rain-snow mix coming through on Friday. We do cool down, of course, with that move.
Re-entering Australia for 3 years.
Wow, so this isn't over. Good to have you on this side of the pond. Great job on GMA this weekend, James. To the other news this Monday night, there is late word this evening of a possible new missile test by North Korea tonight. South Korea is now reporting that North Korea has fired an unidentified projectile into the Sea of Japan. If confirmed, it would be the second weapons launch in a week. No word on what type of missile or how far it went. When we come back here on a Monday night, convicted killer and real estate heir Robert Durst has died, and what we're learning tonight. Also, that historic human heart transplant from a genetically edited pig. We'll be back.
Mittens weren't such a bad idea.
Thank you, God, for this food we are about to receive and for the
challenge. And if he can take care of the football
with RG3. Here we are, right? 2011 Heisman voting 1-2, and then we reversed it a few months later in the NFL draft 1-2. Congratulations, my man. It's got to feel great. Also, you're walking into this building again. 45 starts in this building. You just told me this is the first time you've walked back into Lucas Oil Stadium since your retirement. You do so now as a college football Hall of Famer. How's that all feel? Capture it for us.
Oh, thank you. It's hard to capture it. One, thankful. I'm so happy for the city of Indianapolis to host this incredible game. Amazing honor. So happy to share it with Stanford. It's meant so much to me while I was there and since then. Great coaches, especially
7 virtual care. We got.
How you doing? I'm Danny Tanner, DJ's dad.
Bob Saget may have been best known as America's favorite single dad of the late 80s and early 90s, Danny Tanner, raising 3 daughters on the show Full House.
Okay, I have everyone sandwiched just the way they want them. Turkey all white meat, turkey and Swiss. Swiss, no turkey. Turkey all dark meat, extra tomato. Turkey, extra turkey. Turkey, half dark meat, half white meat. And peanut butter and banana. Hold the turkey. What do you think?
The show dominated primetime airwaves for 8 years and was rebooted as Fuller House in 2016 on Netflix, starring many of the same child actors, now grown up.
I just screamed the loudest when I saw them. I was like, oh my God, it's Bob Saget! Ah!
I do that too when I wake up in the morning.
Saget was also the host of America's Funniest Home Videos.
Ladies and gentlemen, Bob Saget.
On Sunday nights from 1989 to 97, showing America our own most embarrassing candid moments, perhaps the audience's first experience with user-generated content in an era where the camcorder became ubiquitous in middle-class households. But Saget's career was made of much more than the family man persona.
Hey, welcome to the neighborhood.
Hey, Bob Saget.
But do me a favor, don't you my daughters. I'm just with you.
He had an edgy, R-rated sense of humor, pushing back against his success from squeaky clean shows.
This is the longest John Stamos has gone without putting his in a desperate actress. Marijuana is not a drug. I used to suck for coke. I seen him. Now that's an addiction, man.
His real-life addiction, so to speak, was stand-up comedy. In his final tweet in Orlando, Florida, where he was just beginning a comedy tour, he said, "I had no idea I did a 2-hour set tonight. I'm happily addicted again to this." In a 2013 Esquire interview, Saget was asked to define his humor. He said, quote, "I am basically just a 9-year-old boy that evolved." But his family and friends also remember the man that evolved, not just the comedian. Saget's family said, quote, "He was everything to us, and we want you to know how much he loved his fans, performing live and bringing people from all walks of life together with laughter." Full House co-star John Stamos posted, quote, "I am broken. I am gutted. I am in complete and utter shock. I will never, ever have another friend like him."
I love them all, and John and Dave are like brothers to me.
You stuck it out and you got through it. Just like we always do. Just like we always will.
Natasha Chen, CNN, Los Angeles.
Full House was so special in my household. Our deepest, deepest condolences to Bob Saget's family and friends. May he rest in peace, and may his memory be a blessing. We'll be right back.